A thunderous roar tore through the still night sky. Explosions of earth-shaking force rattled the ground. Right here, at the Poipet Aranyaprathet checkpoint, the notorious, strategic border between Thailand and was engulfed in flames. This was not a typical border clash. It was a large-scale, combined arms assault, planned and executed with ruthless precision. Dozens of BM-21 rocket launchers and Chinese-supplied A-100 multiple rocket systems rained down an unrelenting storm of fire on Thai positions. Moments later, the elite 911 Special Brigade of the Cambodian Army, under heavy reconnaissance drone support, simultaneously stormed across the border. Thai border outposts, caught completely off guard, were quickly overwhelmed by firepower and engulfed in smoke and flame. Bangkok was taken by surprise. A core U.S. ally in Southeast Asia was facing a serious territorial invasion. This shock came amid mounting geopolitical tensions, already pushed to the brink by the Phnom Penh Canal project. The immediate question arose: was this an isolated act of military adventurism by Phnom Penh, or a sacrificial pawn move, a brutal test by a far greater power lurking in the shadows? How would Washington respond when its ally was attacked? The Southeast Asian chessboard was now officially on fire. This spark was no coincidence. It had been smoldering for years, fueled by endless historical disputes over the sovereignty of ancient temples and by deep, persistent disagreements over hundreds of kilometers of undefined border territory. But those were only the surface issues. The true tipping point was the rapid geopolitical transformation, reshaping all of Southeast Asia. The Phnom Penh Canal project was far more than an economic venture. It was a double-edged sword, a strategic spear point, capable of altering the flow of trade, and more importantly, the flow of military power, piercing directly into the region's flank. It bore Beijing's imprint, clearer than ever. China's growing presence in Cambodia, from the expansion of the Ream Naval Base to the mystery of the massive Dara Sakir Airport, was no longer mere speculation. These were dual-use infrastructures, strategic launchpads, ready to serve a much larger ambition, a new order that Beijing sought to impose. And at the center of this transformation, Phnom Penh stood more confident than ever. The Royal Cambodian Armed Forces had undergone a stunning metamorphosis. This was no longer the outdated army of the past. It had been rapidly modernized, fueled by abundant weapon supplies and no-strings-attached loans from the north. In its ranks were agile VT-5 light tanks, highly maneuverable, with powerful firepower built for jungle terrain, precision-guided A-100 rocket systems with ranges of over 60 miles, capable of obliterating any nearby command center, and most fearsome of all, squadrons of reconnaissance and combat UAVs. The weapons now rewriting the rules of modern warfare. Cambodia's leadership likely believed they held both timing and terrain advantage. They believed that, under the firm backing of a global power, this was the golden moment to test Washington's response, and at the same time, to assert a new, weighty voice, that Cambodia was no longer a small player in the regional power game. It had become a force that could make the entire chessboard tremble. The balance in Southeast Asia would never be the same. Their counterpart was the Kingdom of Thailand, one of the oldest treaty allies, and among the key pillars of the United States in Asia. Their forces were anything but weak. The Royal Thai Air Force had long been a regional point of pride, with continuously upgraded F-16 squadrons, and especially the Nordic Predator, the J, one of the most advanced 4.5 generation fighters in service today. Their army was also equipped with formidable heavy weapons, from Oplot main battle tanks purchased from Ukraine to France's renowned Caesar 155mm self-propelled howitzers, famous for highly effective shoot-and-scoot tactics. But they had a critical vulnerability, one that any powerful force can succumb to: strategic surprise. Strategically, Bangkok, though ever wary of its neighbor, seemed overconfident in its elder brother status. They may have prepared for sporadic skirmishes, for cross-border artillery duels, but they never anticipated that fast push forward, do not stop, would be the audacious order to unleash a large-scale combined arms assault, a true act of war. And then that moment came. At 4 a.m. local time, the hour struck. The sky was still thick with night, Deadly silence blanketed the Sa-Kao border, but thousands of feet above the ground. Electronic eyes that never sleep were watching. CH-92A reconnaissance drones, supplied by China, had been quietly patrolling for hours, silently mapping targets, locking onto Thailand's defensive positions, and streaming coordinates back to the command center in real time. Then hell opened. The order was issued from a carefully concealed command post. Immediately, dozens of BM-21 launchers and AR-1A systems unleashed a torrent of steel deep into Thai territory. The air shrieked and howled, merging with earth-shaking blasts. This was no random shelling, no mere warning shots. It was a deliberate annihilation strike, timed down to the second. The first targets: Thai Army Command and Communications Centers, C2, near the frontier. A blow meant to sever the head, paralyzing command and coordination from minute one. The second targets: depots, ammunition stores, and early warning radar sites. A strike to blind the eyes and break the limbs of Thailand's defenses. The third targets were the border outposts themselves, where Thai soldiers, still in deep sleep, had no idea disaster was imminent. Chain explosions turned hardened bunkers into rubble. Thai border posts were engulfed in flames. Within mere minutes, their command network was crippled instantly. Panic spread like... But the nightmare had only begun, as artillery shifted lanes to pound deeper into Thai rear areas, and the ground still quaked with aftershocks. From the darkness emerged the 911 Special Forces Brigade, the sharpest steel fist of Cambodia's army, reportedly drilled rigorously by Chinese advisors. They split into multiple spearheads, surging forward in unison. They moved fast, night vision equipped, with modern personal weapons and night fighting skills, far beyond what Thailand had imagined. They crossed the border, not for small skirmishes, but to seize ground. Their objectives were clear: occupy strategic high points, the key hills inside Thai territory, specifically in Sa-Kao province. From there, they could establish hardened defensive outposts, fortify the positions on commanding terrain, and control the approaches. From that vantage, they could lock down the area with overlapping fires, dig trenches, and prepare for any counterattack. Deploying anti-tank guns and man-portable air defense missiles, they fully controlled the vital routes, blocking Thai reinforcements and creating a fait accompli, irreversible on the ground for Thailand. Chaos swept through the border units, long accustomed only to sporadic clashes, now completely overwhelmed. Survivors tried to retreat in panic. Communications were severed. Command lost situational awareness and direction. At Thailand's strategic air bases, sirens blared deafeningly. The F-16 and Gripen aces were ordered to scramble. The Hawks and Raptors streaked into the night sky, carrying the hope of turning the tide. But they faced a thorny problem: fighting in the dark, with friend and foe completely blended together. The Cambodian Special Forces, after seizing the high ground, quickly dispersed and concealed themselves, using Thailand's rugged terrain itself as a shield. The Thai Air Force could not bomb at will. It could not pour firepower onto its own territory without clearly identified targets, and with ground intelligence nearly non-existent. The chaos of the fog of war completely crippled the counterstrike of Bangkok's initial air response. Upon deeper analysis, Phnom Penh's strategic intent was laid bare. First, to create a fait accompli. By occupying a piece of Thai territory, even a small one, they would gain an absolute advantage at the negotiating table, forcing Bangkok, from a position of strength, to sit down and talk from a position of weakness. Second, and most importantly, this was a test, a trial by fire. Phnom Penh was testing the U.S. commitment to Thailand, whether the Manila Pact and the then Rust Communique, the foundational documents of the U.S. Thai alliance, spanning decades, still had practical force, or were merely paper promises, covered in the dust of time. How would Washington respond? Quickly or slowly, strongly or weakly, when an old ally was attacked, and one cannot ignore the giant shadow standing backstage. Beijing, it didn't need to show its face, it only had to watch in silence, providing weapons and intelligence. And, most importantly, the political green light. For Beijing, this scenario was a perfect test. If Cambodia succeeded, China would benefit. U.S. influence in Southeast Asia would be severely pushed back. If Cambodia failed, China would lose nothing but a pawn on the board. In return, it would gain priceless data on the will to intervene and on U.S. methods of warfare in a modern proxy conflict, a move that could scarcely be more insidious. The entire region held its breath. The initial shock in Bangkok quickly turned into fury at being stabbed in the back by a nation they had never considered. An immediate military threat, an intolerable humiliation. Though Thailand's command system was paralyzed in the first hours, it did not collapse. They were a professional, and as dawn broke, counterattack orders were issued. The 2nd Armored Brigade, with steel fists of T-84 oplots and even VT-4s sourced directly from China, was immediately deployed to the Sa-Kao front. Following them were the famed Caesar self-propelled guns, 155 millimeters, rapidly establishing firing positions, ready to rain down fire in reply. But the counteroffensive was anything but easy. The Cambodian Special Forces had seized the high ground. They had nearly 12 hours to dig trenches and lay mines, and in place anti-tank teams and air defense missiles, manpads. Fierce fighting erupted. The Thai military, though superior in heavy firepower, met organized, desperate resistance. Thai tanks struggled over rugged terrain, running into anti-tank ambushes. The Royal Thai Air Force's F-16s and Gripens scrambled to provide cover, but acted cautiously, as Cambodia's manpads kept firing from concealed positions. The battle along the border quickly devolved into a bloody stalemate. Clearly, Cambodia wasn't striking and withdrawing. They were determined to hold ground. Immediately in Bangkok, a historic decision was made. Thailand's ambassador in Washington formally invoked the 1954 Manila Pact and, specifically, the 1962 Thanat Rusk Communique, asking the United States to honor alliance commitments to defend Thailand against aggression. The ball was kicked straight into Washington's court. The news shook the Pentagon and the White House. It was precisely the scenario U.S. policymakers feared most: a proxy war. In the heart of Southeast Asia, where U.S. and Chinese interests intertwine, the U.S. president appeared before the press in the Oval Office. His voice steely, with no hesitation. He stated clearly, "The United States condemns Cambodia's unprovoked aggression against our treaty ally, Thailand. This is a blatant violation of international law and a direct threat to regional peace and stability." And then came the ultimatum. "We demand that Phnom Penh withdraw immediately and unconditionally from all sovereign Thai territory within 12 hours. Otherwise, Cambodia will face severe consequences." 12 hours, a red line was drawn. The world held its breath, eyes on Phnom Penh. In Phnom Penh, the mood seemed calm, even defiant, spurred on, perhaps by Beijing's encouragement and promises of protection. Cambodia's leaders ignored the ultimatum. They believed it was mere. They believed the U.S., mired in the crises of Ukraine and the Middle East, wouldn't dare a large-scale intervention over a few kilometers of borderland in Southeast Asia. They believed China's heavy presence at Ream would shield them from U.S. action. As expected, a carefully worded diplomatic statement calling on all sides to exercise restraint, resolve disputes through peaceful talks, and avoid actions that escalate tensions. A statement entirely non-committal, neither condemning Cambodia's aggression nor calling on its ally to withdraw. The signal was unmistakable. Beijing was giving Phnom Penh the green light. 12 hours passed. The clock ticked past the deadline. Along the Sa-Kao border, the gunfire not only failed to cease, it intensified. Cambodia had given its answer. Now it was America's turn to act. Inside the White House Situation Room and at the Pentagon, a tense but brief debate unfolded. Option 1. Deploy Marine forces, MEUs from amphibious assault ships of the WASP, or America classes, only days from the Gulf of Thailand, to land, coordinate with Thai forces, and push Cambodian troops back. This option was immediately rejected. No quagmire. That was the supreme directive. Sending in U.S. infantry would be stepping into China's trap, turning it into a long, costly ground war, and giving Beijing a pretext to intervene more deeply. Option 2. A carpet bombing campaign, using B-52s over a wide area. This, too, was rejected. It would cause massive civilian casualties, violate modern rules of engagement, and place the U.S. in a position of being universally condemned. And push the United States into a position of being universally condemned. The world condemned it. Option 3. A surgical strike. This was the doctrine of the 21st century. No ground invasion, no indiscriminate destruction, but a strike of absolute precision. Swift, unexpected, and symbolically devastating. A strike not against Cambodian troops at the border, but against the command that gave the order and the infrastructure that enabled the assault. Targets identified. Decision approved. The Allied sword was ready to strike. 2 key forces were assigned the mission. Force 1, B-2 Spirit stealth bombers. Ghosts worth $2 billion each. Took off silently from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri or Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. They would fly halfway around the world undetected, carrying stealth cruise missiles, JASSMs, and precision-guided GBU-31 JDAM bunker busters. Force 2, F-35B Lightning IIs of the U.S. Marine Corps. They needed no runways. They launched vertically from the assault ship, USS America, LHA-6, which had been conducting freedom of navigation patrols in the South China Sea and now covertly closed in on the Gulf of Thailand. But for these phantoms and lightning bolts to strike, they needed an electronic shield. And that was the mission of the EA-18 Growlers, the growling beasts that would clear the way. Night fell for the second time since the conflict began. The 12-hour deadline had long expired. In Cambodia, their air defense network, mainly HQ-9 systems, supplied by China, still swept the skies. They believed nothing could slip through. Any Chinese advisors present were likely watching the screens. They were wrong. Phase 1 began. Off the Gulf of Thailand, EA-18 Growler squadrons flew in standoff mode, beyond missile range, activating their YLQ-99 and YLQ-218 jamming suites. An invisible electromagnetic storm, but one of devastating power, swept over Cambodia. At the Air Defense Command Center in Phnom Penh, disaster struck. All radar screens erupted into static. From sweeping green lines, they turned into blizzards of white noise. Communications between headquarters and missile batteries, filled with screeches, then went silent. Cambodia's air defense network, China's pride, was blinded, deafened, and paralyzed within seconds. They had no idea what was happening. They saw nothing. Phase 2 began. That was when the ghosts appeared. From the stratosphere, over 50,000 feet high, the B-2 Spirits opened their bomb bays. Stealth JSSM cruise missiles slipped silently away. Mini-jet engines roared to life. It dove earthward, hugging the terrain at near supersonic speed, invisible to radar. At the same time, closer in, F-35B squadrons crossed the border undetected. Their advanced EODS sensors locked precisely onto pre-selected targets. Target 1, not soldiers at the border, but Cambodia's C2 Command Center, the heart of the Defense Ministry in Phnom Penh, where the order to attack Thailand had. Target 2, the HQ-9 launch sites, now blinded, rendered immobile. Target 3, the most symbolic of all, the Ream Naval Base, not the whole base, but its strategic infrastructure, newly built piers, intelligence and command facilities. Sites believed to be supported and used by China. 2,000-pound GBU-31 dams were released by F-35s, diving with pinpoint accuracy, piercing the roof of the C2 building in Phnom Penh. A single strike that would reshape the war. A violent explosion from within turned Cambodia's entire war nerve center to ashes. At Ream, the JSSM missiles streaked in. They didn't hit warehouses. They slammed straight into the bases of the new piers, bringing them down. They homed in on radar buildings, on communication centers, erasing them from the ground. The entire operation unfolded in just 1 hour, a lightning strike of absolute precision, devastating and unstoppable, a strike not meant to seize land, but to break the will, to destroy command capability, and send a chilling message not only to Phnom Penh, but to Beijing as well. Phnom Penh shook, not from bomb aftershocks, but from absolute psychological shock. 1 hour, just 1 hour. And everything they had built, the command system, their proud air defense, and the strategic Ream port, all had turned to ashes. The Cambodian leaders, who only hours earlier were confident, brushing off the U.S. ultimatum, now sat stunned. Satellite phones went dead, radar screens went pitch black, radio contact with the border front was completely severed. They could no longer feel their own army. They had been ruthlessly and precisely decapitated. Helplessness, an absolute helplessness, spread. They had gone too far. They had misjudged the foe. They had trusted in protection. That was nowhere to be found. They had provoked, not a paper tiger, but a high-tech predator that had just coldly torn apart their central nervous system. A harsh truth emerged. America's strike was so fast, so neat, so precise. It surpassed every worst-case scenario they'd imagined, and its decapitation effects spread to the border front almost immediately. In Sakeo, the Special Forces of Brigade 91 were still fighting hard. They were skilled soldiers, battle-hardened and confident after their initial success. But suddenly their radios went dead. No more orders from above. No more intel on Thai troop movements. No more coordinated artillery support. They were suddenly abandoned, fighting alone in a void. Chaos began to creep in. Platoon and company commanders tried to reach one another, but heard only terrifying silence. They didn't know the nerve center in Phnom Penh was gone. They only knew they'd lost comms. And at the very moment, Cambodian confusion peaked. Thailand received a priceless gift. America's electronic eyes, now fully focused on the battlefield. High-altitude RQ-4 reconnaissance drones, Global Hawk, and military satellites began streaming real-time intelligence directly to Thailand's forward command center. The Thai military, from passive and chaotic, suddenly became all-seeing. They saw every Cambodian position clearly, every machine gun nest, every bunker, every fragile supply line. They saw the confusion, the loss of direction, as Cambodian units began moving haphazardly, trying to reach one another. The fog of war, which had paralyzed the Thai Air Force 12 hours earlier, had now vanished completely, enveloping the Cambodian army instead. The general counteroffensive, the order went out. This was no longer a seesaw skirmish. This was a hunt. Thailand's Caesar self-propelled guns, fed U.S. meter-accurate coordinates, began shoot-and-scoot fire missions. 155mm shells rained down with absolute precision onto Cambodian clusters huddled in defense, shattering their formations. Thailand's Oplot and VT-4 tanks no longer had to inch forward, but advanced with confidence, guided to skirt the minefields and anti-tank ambush sites. And in the sky, the F-16s and Gripens now had clear targets. They dove to drop laser-guided bombs and poured 20mm cannon fire into the last pockets of resistance. Cambodian special forces, no matter how elite, could not withstand an enemy that both dominated in firepower and knew their every move. Their lines broke. Organized resistance collapsed entirely. From a tactical withdrawal, it turned into a chaotic rout. They discarded heavy weapons, trying to run back across the border. The military adventure, which began with now ended in a disastrous collapse. The Royal Thai Army quickly retook all occupied territory, all within just a few hours after the U.S. airstrike. And now the world turned to Beijing and Moscow. How would they respond to America's brazen military action aimed at their ally? Silence. A terrifying silence enveloped Beijing. The Foreign Ministry spokesperson appeared at the regular press briefing with a familiar tone, but this time somewhat strained. They issued only a single statement. They expressed deep concern over the escalation, urging all parties to exercise restraint and resolve differences through dialogue. That's all. No condemnation of the United States, no threat of retaliation, no military action, however small, to protect ally Cambodia. Why? Why was Beijing so silent and powerless? The first reason, and the most important, is the legal calculus and a trap they cannot fall into. The United States calculated this move perfectly. They did not attack Chinese personnel. They did not attack Chinese warships. They struck Cambodian military facilities located on Cambodia's sovereign territory. Even Ream Base, though believed to be backed by China, is legally still Cambodian soil. This put Beijing in a bind. The U.S. attacked Cambodia in response to Cambodia's invasion of Thailand, a U.S. treaty ally under international law, and America's action, though controversial, can be justified as collective self-defense. Now, China were to send the South Sea Fleet from the South China Sea into the Gulf of Thailand to attack the U.S. 7th Fleet, then China would be the aggressor, the escalator of conflict without cause. They would have no pretext, no casus belli. The second reason is the escalation trap. Would Beijing dare face the U.S. 7th Fleet head-on, right now just for Cambodia? No, certainly not. The 7th Fleet, with a nuclear-powered carrier, cruisers, Aegis warships, and attack submarines, is at the highest state of combat readiness. Any move by China's Navy would be seen as hostile and risk leading to a clash, for which China is not ready. Cambodia, in the larger game, though important, is still just a pawn. No one sacrifices a rook, the Navy, or the Queen, ballistic missiles, just to save a pawn. Beijing had to swallow the bitter pill, accept this loss, rather than be dragged into a full-scale war, so catastrophic they have no chance to win. And the third, deepest reason is the technology shock. The strike by F-35BS and B-2s, and especially the electronic warfare prowess of the EA-18G, sent a chilling message to Chinese strategists. China's KS-1C air defense system that they proudly export were neutralized with ease. Why did Cambodia's command network, which may have been set up with their help, collapse so quickly? This strike wasn't just punishment. It was also an expensive weapons demo. America is telling China, this is what we can do. This is the technology gap between us. Think very carefully before acting on Taiwan or anywhere else. Beijing's silence is an admission of that technology gap. Moscow's the Kremlin, already pouring everything into and nearly exhausted by the battlefield in Ukraine, simply condemned the U.S. action and called it interference in internal affairs. Empty words without weight. Russia has no core strategic interest here, and more importantly, no military capacity to intervene in a hotspot thousands of miles away, with its Pacific Fleet also constrained. Thus, in the face of America's decisive strike, the two rival great powers could only watch in silence. The situation had completely changed. Cambodia received a blood-soaked lesson about the cost of testing fire and the fragility of a seemingly solid protector's umbrella. With a single strike, the United States reaffirmed its credibility. It showed all of Southeast Asia that America's alliance, and more importantly, that it has the will and the technology to enforce those commitments. China's credibility as a protector took a devastating blow. Other small states in the region, which had been wavering, will now rethink which side truly guarantees their security. The chessboard was reshuffled by a single lightning strike. A military adventure born of overconfidence ended in strategic catastrophe. In under 48 hours from the first shots, the conflict was over. No protracted negotiations, no third-party intervention. Facing a completely paralyzed command system, a routed army at the border, and absolute silence from its northern ally, Phnom Penh had no options left. They were forced to accept the ultimatum, withdraw all remaining forces, accept an unconditional ceasefire, and return to the status quo ante. Tactically, Thailand regained all its territory. Strategically, the United States won an even greater victory. This scenario established a new order, or rather reaffirmed an old order. By new means, the United States proved, clearly and brutally, that it doesn't need to send tens of thousands of troops to get bogged down in Southeast Asia. As in the ghosts of the past, the era of total war may have receded. In its place is the era of surgical strikes and high-tech warfare, where a single stealth squadron, backed by electronic warfare, can break the will and capability of an entire nation in just 1 hour. From this, hard-earned lessons emerged. The first lesson, and the clearest, is the value of deterrence. Deterrent power in the 21st century is not just the number of tanks or the size of infantry divisions. It's stealth technology, the pinpoint accuracy of smart weapons, mastery of cyber and electronic domains, and most importantly, the political will to use those weapons when the red line is crossed. The strike on Cambodia was, in essence, a chilling warning sent straight to Beijing and anyone who wants to challenge the US-backed order. The second lesson is the catastrophic price of becoming a pawn in the geopolitical chess game of great powers. Cambodia's miscalculation was a fatal mistake. They overestimated their protector's umbrella and underestimated their opponent's alliance commitments. They believed they could take reckless action without paying a price, only to realize when the crisis erupted, the interests of the patron power are never identical to those of the nation, proxy. And finally, though this hypothetical scenario is brutal, it is the most profound lesson about the fragility of peace. Reminds us, especially Vietnam, a nation in a critically strategic location, that armed conflict right next door is always a present danger. It underscores the supreme value of maintaining strategic autonomy, internal strength, national unity, and a defense strong enough to protect itself, combined with deft bamboo diplomacy, balanced and flexible. That is the firmest foundation to safeguard sovereignty and maintain peace in a turbulent world where a single nation's mistake can lead to its own destruction.